So many websites look the same, everything's centrally aligned with elements stacked on top of one another. Why? Because your brain craves balance. It instinctively knows when something feels just off, and it wants compositions on the screen to feel stable, just like in the physical world. So central alignment is used because symmetry is the simplest way to achieve balance. But balance and symmetry are not the same things. In the next few minutes, I'm going to encourage you to stop centering everything as I show you why and how to create asymmetrical layouts. Take a physical product like the classic iPod design. Here, symmetrical is calm. It gives that sense of stability. And so we like that in the physical product. And that sort of language can translate to graphical elements too, like the London Underground symbol. This being solid, it feels safe, and that's certainly what you want when you're going to go into a metal tube far underneath the ground. So this definitely is an option if you want something that is ordered, that is often understated, but it has that calmness to it. But as we said in the intro, balance isn't the same as symmetry. So you can think of something graphically where they are aligned symmetrically. But then if we have the item on the right become larger, it now feels like this isn't balanced, like there's too much weight on the right hand side. And we imagine this being like a balance scales here. But if we actually just move that item, the larger item, more towards the center of the fulcrum, it now can appear balanced, even though it's not symmetrical anymore. It's now asymmetrical. It's a distribution of visual weight. You can see that in action on the iPad Air website, where the text fills in that space in the top left with the weight of the image filling the space in the bottom right. So these can feel the visual weight is distributed across the page. So why should we even bother with asymmetry, and how does it work? Well, the first thing we've just seen is that we can use counterpoints to achieve balance. Value, not just size, impacts balance. So back to our diagram again. If we have this larger circle on the right hand side, now feels imbalanced. But if we change the value, so we make that into the purple, that's the same size as the kind of the fulcrum position, then this now can appear more balanced because our eye is drawn more to the lime colored circle that is on the left, and we can achieve balance with value. So value means things like color, it could also be texture, and you just give a sense of a density and weight there on the page. Further down on the iPad Air website, we have that again because we have this dark colored arm that reaches across, that's in shadow, and that brings weight to that sort of area, with the value, and then the whole negative space around it gives us a figure ground relationship to allow these things to be in balance. And then with the white pencil, that becomes almost like a part of the ground, and the background splits the layout, so we know that we're seeing balance, asymmetrically on either side of that diagonal. And deliberate use of positioning and white space is really important within a composition to give it that dynamic balance. Asymmetry also creates tension within the composition. I found a couple of examples of this in an old graphic design book that I had here in the studio. And in the first one, I love the description that it looks like these graphical elements are about to tumble down. These rectangles, which reflect the logo word mark, that small red E that we can see right at the top of the composition, are arranged in this structure to look like blocks. And although it's just a printed static image, it has that real sense of movement within it and a dynamism and the weight, and our eyes kind of led around that. But there's some clever counterpoints and the use of value again with the red, just to make itself feel balanced. And this next example further down the page, it shows how this thin diagonal line just creates a really interesting tension within the composition, because visual interest is added to something where everything else is, horizontal and vertical. All of a sudden this split makes us feel the two sides of it, makes us feel the asymmetry, and just something really simple like a thin rule there can just bring some interest when it's done deliberately by a skilled designer. Center compositions can leave negative space in the corners. This has been used cleverly again on the iPad Air website, where these iPads are tumbling down from the top left to the bottom right, creating more dynamism. And then the spaces that are created in the top right and the bottom left are then filled with little blocks of text. But these don't feel too heavy or overwhelm the thing into a blocky layout. Because they're text, they don't produce as much weight on the page because the space is in the characters and between the lines, and that helps balance this as a composition in this panel. Asymmetrical layouts can also add visual interest. It just gives us more options, more things to play with. And this mini site for this watch, which is Jean-Michel Basquiat collaboration with Raymond Weil, and we can see here that we have got elements that are arranged more organically, and there's an interaction of the sort of the form and ground and um, the white space, but just with elements of different sizes that work together. I mean, we've got this caption that says very obvious askew, and the whole idea of things being askew with this sort of designer, if we had just this very formal centered layout, it wouldn't really fit this artist style. So now having these elements arranged in this way, and when we can click into them, and we have this asymmetry again, with this large element of the watch, medium headline and images, and then some smaller text here. And as we scroll, it actually goes horizontally. Each one of these compositions, sort of still, works in this asymmetrical way with small little elements bringing balance, just like this little close button in the top left that helps do that. And every one of these items that we can click into follows this sort of format. Even as we hover over them, we get a diagonal line, which is very much like that print layout that we saw. And this is really shows the excellence that can be achieved in web design when you put together an asymmetrical layout. Even on a more corporate website like this one, Clear Street, where we start off with a centered layout. We have this navigation unit that is centered, and we have a centered headline and then some centered text, just 3 lines. But as we go through, we have some options. So now we're into a grid layout. The text is actually aligned to the left here, and sometimes center alignment works. This feels very stable. It feels calming. It works well with this video in the background. So it's absolutely appropriate. But once we get through this video story, we kind of finish our centered section here with this, kind of centrifugal animation. So everything's very centered. But then once we go down here, we now have more of a grid style layout left aligned. And then here, compositionally, in each one of these panels, we have things aligned to the left. But then the use of all these elements make the asymmetrical layout work. We have our large element here, which, pulls some weight onto this side. But because we'd have all this negative space at the top, just by adding this blue circular icon here, it just adds a little bit of weight in that corner to help the thing overall feel balanced. And they can continue to do that here. We've got, again, the idea of something sweeping across, kind of cutting across our layout. And even if we go into like the company page and see how they do it through the rest of the website, they start again with a centered layout. But as we get through here, we go into more of a grid-based layout. And so there's the option here to vary it. And we've got more of an editorial type style here. This is kind of a masonry grid as we go through. These are offline, and there's different kind of grid based options here, but it just allows you to vary a little bit and you don't have to center everything. Asymmetry also makes text easier to read. I would really encourage you not to center long blocks of text so that you have the rag on both the left and the right. This is harder to read. So when you should center text, let's scroll through this Apple iPad website Air that we saw a few stills of before. They do start off center aligned, and Apple use that a lot because they want to project that calmness and that formality. That's part of their brand. But once you go through, they do actually use lots of different options here. So we've got things that are, left align and cut through, and we have this kind of asymmetry with these panels here. But you just have to watch with type. This is probably as long as I would go with having the rag on both sides. Once you get much longer than that, you don't really want to be having. See, I feel this is now a bit too long for a text block to be center aligned. And as we get down to here, yes, we have got in this section we saw earlier, strictly aligned left with the rag on the right. And that should be our default for paragraphs, even ones with short line lengths like this. That is the easiest to read. And again, they've done that here once we go into a larger sort of portion of text. This website is a great example of good typesetting. As we scroll through here, there are some larger portions of text, but it makes you want to read it because it feels like a magazine. We've got this column layout, and we've got sensible line lengths and sensible line heights, nicely chosen fonts. There's enough contrast, so it makes us want to read it and spend time with it. Imagine if all this was one column centered text, you would never read that. So making use of these sort of asymmetrical layouts here and the way these elements are balanced, just this little lead-in title for number 1, number 2 for each section helps balance these layouts really well and makes it legible and makes it something where you would spend time there. And finally, asymmetrical compositions help to lead the viewer's eye around the layout. It keeps it in play. Graphic designers talk about the pinball theory of layout, where if you think of the game pinball at the arcade, you're trying to keep the ball in play all the time. And as you do, it's bouncing around off the sides and off all the different elements that are within the machine. And we want to keep the eye doing the same thing. And this time it's our communication score that is going higher as we keep the eye in play and we keep people involved. If you look at this layout here on an about page for this bike company, Stenger, we have an asymmetrical layout here where there's lots of nice counterbalancing elements on the left and the right, the top and the bottom that come through here. And these little elements, like here, we've got these little small mono captions here in all caps with a monospace font. They just kind of keep the eye in play. So instead of it bouncing around, we keep looking around and we really take in the things. So we might not necessarily read a line like service quality is a matter of honor if the layout didn't lead us to do it and keep our eye engaged. We would have gone away from here and we would have actually not picked up on this. And as we go through this site, they want to make a statement, they'll center align that, that's okay. But we go into here and there's just like a nice compositional balance in these asymmetrical layouts where we have this title here, our experience is your great advantage, balancing out as it sits within the negative space here, this paragraph which is taking up more weight on the page, but because of the space here and its position, it makes the thing work. And they continue to follow these sorts of asymmetrical layouts as we go through this timeline and the rest of the site before moving into more of a grid and then these very graphical sort of poster-like portions that interrupt it. So the next time you're tempted to produce a strictly horizontally centered composition, remember that it may well be the right choice, but take the time to experiment with asymmetrical options, get the balance right, and you may well end up with a more effective layout. Until next time, happy designing.